Derek, oh, I'm on. Okay, that was our opening video here. Hey, folks, welcome to the designer panel of DTCon 2017. Thank you. All right, so we're going to get started here quickly because we're going to end by 8 so that we can get ready for the Dice Tower award show that's going to be streamed later on, and that you can come to if you want to. You can stick around afterwards. These guys are here. Did I say Dice Tower award show? Yes. So what I meant, Dice Tower game show is later on. They're very similar.
With big awards.
So what we're going to do is we're going to start by having everyone introduce themselves down the line. We'll talk very briefly, and then we're going to open up the floor to you. We're going to steal one of the Richards mics, and Matt's going to run around and let you guys ask questions. You can start formulating them now. But as I always do, first of all, you are not allowed to use your question to pitch a game that you are doing. I know you're all laughing, but this has happened, okay? You are not allowed to ask if you start designing with theme or mechanisms first, because that's been done to death. Just go watch one of the 80 times it's been answered before. What are the other questions?
Don't ask how much we make.
No, okay. No, you told me there was other questions that people could not ask any longer.
Well, what's your process?
Oh yeah, what's your process of designing a game, and what's your favorite game? Because they're just going to say, "Oh, my games are my favorite." No,
some of them.
No, I'm not going to say all of them.
All right, so we're going to start here in the end with Mr. Borg.
My name is Richard Borg. I've been designing games for quite a while. Actually, if you can take a look at some of the very early Dungeons and Dragons stuff, I'm a play tester in some of that. I've had about 56 games published now, and we got about 4 or 5 coming up. And I live right here in the Orlando area.
I'm Richard Launius. I've been designing games. Really, my first one was, I think, 1986, 87. Somewhere there we did the original first Arkham Horror. So over the years, I've not done it full time, but over the past 8 or 9 years, I've been doing it fairly full time. And I don't know what I've got, probably 15. I don't know, some number of games, but that includes Arkham Horror and Elder Sign and the Defenders of the Realm and Defenders of Last Stand type series and Run, Fight, or Die, those type of games. So.
Oh, you wanted me to talk?
Hi, I'm Eric. I make games.
I'm Ignacy. I make games.
Yeah, he's a copycat too.
You wish.
No, that's Freeman.
Yeah, I did Robinson Crusoe, Imperial Settlers, and a couple of other games, and you probably know that. So.
Hey, I'm Steve Avery, and I'm probably the least, I've been designing for the least long up here, like maybe just about 5 years, and I've had a couple games out on the market, and hopefully more to come.
Well, what are they?
Nothing Personal, which Tom Vassell designed.
Oh, yeah.
And then Ta-Da, and then just recently Kickstarter just funded for Metal Dawn. So, thank you.
Yay. Why did you use this mic and not yours?
They kept on passing it down.
It. All right. Yes, Nothing Personal, which sold a copy last 2 months.
Awesome.
We're very proud of that. So there's been a lot of things about designers recently. There's a lot of new designers who are in the business. Everyone comes, probably who here has a prototype that they're working on at any given point? Right.
Wow.
Oh, this side raised their hand, this side did not.
Slow.
Okay.
I don't make games anymore.
So one of the questions we get often asked is, how do you get a publisher to look at your design? I mean, that's a task in and of itself. So I thought it might be interesting to hear how you got your first game looked at by a publisher. So we'll start from anybody who wants to go. And it can't be you were your own publisher.
Okay. So yeah. I guess I go to a lot of cons, and I very sociable, so I like to meet a lot of people. And after a while, if you go to a lot of cons, you start seeing the same faces over and over again, and you make friends with people, and you know, you make appointments and try to get your game in front of somebody. But if you're not in that arena where you're not getting out to cons, there are other ways to get your games in front of publishers. The best way that I would think is to do like a very short video, very, very short video, like a minute-long video, and a little sell sheet, and just start sending them out to publishers, and make sure that you send it out to publishers who like the type of game that you're making. I'm probably never going to show a game to Rio Grande. I mean, that's just not my style of game. They would not be interested in my games. So doing a little bit of research about what's out there and what publishers are looking for first, and then trying to fill that niche. Many of them are very candid what they're looking for, right? It's not just a good game. They're looking for specific types of games. So like, well, I really like to play, you know, I really want games that you can explain in under 3 minutes, make it easy to pitch and sell at cons. Or I really like short games, or I'm looking for party games. You know, so finding out that information and doing the legwork first and then reaching out to them is really important. Because if you just cold call them, then, you know, your chances of getting an appointment or getting them to want them to send you your prototype is not going to be very good.
What was your first game you pitched, Richard Longius?
Oh, you're talking to me? Okay, look, you've got to really go back in time for my first game. It was Arkham Horror, and I sent it off in like 1985. And so you're so far back in time that the game cards were typed on a typewriter. Everything was hand-drawn. Everything was handwritten and hand-painted. So, you know, much different time, hard to present. At least I didn't know how to present. So I'd been doing a couple of role-playing scenarios that I'd sent off to some magazines that had gotten published, and also to Chaosium. So after I designed Arkham Horror, it really pained me to send that off because I had no replacement, no backup, no nothing else. But we all really enjoyed playing it, so everybody kept saying, you ought to send it off, maybe they'll publish it. So I sent it off and waited in silence for about 3 or 4 months, and finally I got a call from Greg Stafford, the president, saying, you know, our people really like this, so we want to publish this game. But I think you know, you have far more resources today, and really the key to it is, you know, certainly if you go to cons, there's lots of opportunities for you to present that we didn't have back then. But the key is make sure you have a good game, make sure you have it finished, make sure that you can present, you know, what your game is about and the experience that you're trying to deliver in just really a few sentences, and then, you know, provide them with a very good brief demo of how the game works. And I think you have a lot of opportunities today.
All right, now someone else.
Yes. Yeah, you do have a good opportunity, much better than what we started with. I basically put my first game in a recipe box and took it to Gen Con, set up a little table, and basically said, all right, this is Doubter's Dice, and but here's where the fortune comes, is a guy from Milton Bradley was at Gen Con that year, picked up a copy of it, took it back to his main office, and basically called me about a month later and said, hey, you know, Rich, you know, we like that game, but it's probably not going to work for us. So it was close to Christmas time, and as the story goes, they were having a Christmas party at Milton Bradley, and the CEO comes in and says, hey, what are you guys doing? You seem like you're having a fun time. Oh, this is a game that we got from an inventor, but we're not going to do it. And he goes, well, if everybody's having a good time with it, what the heck? Why wouldn't we publish it? And so that's how I got my first game sold. So I didn't really do too much, but
I'm not allowed to answer because I broke your cardinal rule. I started my own game company to pitch my first game.
That's not a cardinal rule.
You just said it was.
Oh, go ahead.
I started my own game company. So what happened was when way back when, this is 94, 95, I knew that I wanted to do game design for a living. It was really the only thing I wanted to do. So I became a playtester for a company called FASA, which they're long gone, but they made BattleTech and MechWarrior and Shadowrun, and I was playtesting for them I signed up to playtest for the Shadowrun collectible card game. This is way back when. Does anybody have that game? Anybody play that game? So there you go. I did development work on that game. Oh, cool. You should come up here and talk about it. So I did so much. My playtesting with them was, I went really, really in depth, and I was young and had way too much energy, and I put so much into it that they gave me a development work for it. So I ended up being credited as a developer for the game. Ended up parlaying that into other gigs that didn't really pan out, but I get frustrated of going through the pitching process, so I just started my own game company, incorporated in Canada, hired all my friends, paid the money, like every mistake you can possibly make, and published my first game. But what we did right was kind of what Steve did, except as a company, we went to many conventions, we demoed the game often for for as many people as we could, and we just believed in driving demand from bottom up, just played with gamers all the time. And during that period, we did this for about 2 years. I've cemented a lot of relationships with other publishers, because I had a bunch of games that I wanted to publish, but we couldn't ourselves. We didn't have the money for it. But other publishers were looking at our booth and saying, like, hey, these games look kind of cool. Maybe we could publish them. And I ended up forming a good relationship with Fantasy Flight during that period. And at that point, I said, I want to quit my company, and all I want to do is design games. And they were like, I remember this at one of the conventions, Kristen Peterson said, hey, do you want a job? And I said, yes, of course I do. And that's my start.
Well, let me ask you this then, because well, this is for all of you, and especially Ignacy, because you run a board game company. With today's, you guys mentioned that things changed a lot. So if you were designing your first game now, would you self-publish? Would you go down that route of starting your own company? Would you do it again? Would you recommend it to others?
Sweet God in heaven, no.
The thing of it is, if you do a prototype and you're doing a prototype, it's really not that much more expensive to get a number of them done and take them to a convention and try to sell them if you want. But there's a lot more to just designing games. If you're doing a design, that's one thing. But if you want to be a manufacturer, that's something completely different. So I think most of us up here are all designers first and don't want to be manufacturers. We'd rather take a small cut or a royalty for a game that we designed and then start work on another one. So we have plenty of ideas, and I'm sure most of you have plenty of ideas that would work the same way. But there's nothing wrong with jumping in and doing a Kickstarter or something like that. At least you have a bunch of prototypes to show people and stuff. But with the technology that you have today, you can make a game 10 times better than what my first game was.
I totally agree that these are completely two different things, to be a businessman and run a company, and be a designer and design a game. There are two different hats. I strongly recommend, if you want to be designer, to stay being designer, because being a business person and running a company is quite a task. Most often disasters, problems, troubles. If you want to be designer, just design games, good games, playtest them and send to the publishers, and let the dirty work do the publisher. So he deals with all the delays, problems in manufacturers, quantities, etc., shipment, logistic. Like, there's so many things to have to happen before the game hit the shelves. And then designing a game is this, let's call it, fun part, and then the disaster starts. So don't mix it.
Well, Ignacy, I want to ask a follow-up on that. A lot of times when we talk about this, I get responses or emails from people saying that designers are paid too little. And so a lot of people jump into publishing because they want a bigger cut of the profits.
Yeah.
Is that a statement or a question?
if you do a very good game, the game in today's market will sell at thousands and thousands of copies because the market grew for the past 5 years tremendously. So this opinion, I would say, was valid like 3 or 4 years ago, but these days the big sellers sell really, really very, very high. So I would definitely focus on designing 1 or 2 very good games, and I believe that Alan Moon doesn't have a problem with money, and a couple of other friends are quite fine. So yes, if you have a very good game, don't be afraid. You will have a very good money. Just focus on a good design, and you don't have to be a manufacturer to actually survive.
Any thoughts on that?
Well, I really think it comes down to what do you want to be, because I personally don't believe you can be a game designer and a publisher both for very long. You might be able to do it for a short period. You might be able to publish one of your own games. But once you have to start doing customer service and marketing and all the things around dealing with the games you have out there, you're not going to have time to design in the future. So, you know, it may work for a single game, but my philosophy has always been, well, at least for me, I've always wanted to be a game designer. That's what I want to do. So I want to design games. I don't want to spend my, you know, I know how to do the other pieces, and it's true. There's a ton of tools out there for you now. You can get things done through, you know, desktop publishing and through contacts with manufacturing, different manufacturing, you know, middlemen type businesses, as well as dealing directly with factories. But you're going to stop designing somewhere along the way. You're going to stop being able to really spend, you know, the time doing what you love most that got you into it.
Nowadays, there's slight hype when it comes to new games. A game is designed, and people talk about it. In fact, publishers stop announcing games too early because it just gets out of hand. But how do you deal with that when your game has all this hype? Does that bother you that people are so looking forward to it that their expectations can only be worse? When your game is hyped all the time.
Okay. Yep.
This year we had this problem with the first Martian, and you can literally find in the internet interviews with me when I was saying that First Martian is a boring Euro game. The hype was so terrifying, and the number of retweets about the First Martian, number of views on YouTube for the videos about the First Martian was so high that we decided in the company that we have to kill the hype, or the expectations will be so huge that we will never meet them. Because at some point, everybody was talking about the First Martians, how great this game will be, and we knew it is getting to the level that is never be able to meet. So we started very actively kill the hype, and I was literally giving interviews saying that it's a boring Euro game, and it helped a little bit. So now the hype is at a reasonable level, but yes, I think that the expectations at some point goes viral, and it is dangerous for the company. Like at this point, when the game is finally at your table, you say, well, it's just a good game. Wow, this is a good game. But you expected so much from this game that you are disappointed, and this is bad for the game. So yes, killing the hype is a good strategy.
Well, I played First Martians, and it's the best game I've ever played in my life.
He did not.
Expect the world. He's right, though. We had a similar problem. I don't know if you call it a problem, but a similar phenomenon with Simon has this a lot with our Kickstarters. Right? Our Kickstarters usually launch very big. Rising Sun was our Kickstarter in a few months ago, and we knew it was going to be a big Kickstarter because of it is the game is loosely related to Blood Rage, which did well a couple years ago, but we didn't know it was going to be as big as it was. And I don't know if we actively killed the hype, and it's not a boring Euro game, but it's a boring Euro game. We stopped talking about the game. We're trying to focus on games that are coming out right now. For me personally, I mean, we can't control hype, so I try not to worry about it, and I avoid reading the internet as much as possible. As much as possible.
Well, I wasn't going to come back on that.
All right, we're going to take some questions from you all now. I'm going to give your mic to Matt. You can share with
Thanks
Richard.
a lot.
You're welcome.
But I was just going to tell him I thought Godfather by Eric's probably the greatest game ever made. So
Got me back.
All right, so if you have a question, Matt will come and give it to you, and then he'll be looking for the next question after that. You can ask one or everyone.
This question's for everyone. You probably worked on many designs, and sometimes you have like kind of a writer's block or like a period of time where you know that something about the game isn't working. So how long do you kind of put it on the shelf and let yourself come back to it, or do you just kill the idea and try and move on to something else? What, as a game designer, has been your experience with that?
For me, it's the constant stage of the process. Like for the most time, the prototype doesn't work. When it's working, it's done. So basically, for the all months, something is not working, and you cannot just leave it in the drawer. Or actually, at least I cannot. I just struggle and try to find a solution. And when there is a really, really big, as you say, writer's block, yes, when I don't know how to fix the problem, my family hates me, my employees hates me. I'm in a bad mood for a couple of days or weeks, and because I know that there is a schedule of playtesting, schedule of production I have to finish. The game doesn't work. I have no idea what to do, and this is a disaster. And this, like, basically, if you want to design a game, that means that you want to, for a couple of months, be disappointed. And when you are happy with the results, you already hate the product, and you will never play it again. So basically, I strongly encourage you to change the job that you are looking for. Like, this is always a disaster.
Jump in real quick. Try to get in front of some other people, especially people who haven't played the game before. You know, just they may not have the solution you're looking for, but they might have a different perspective that makes you think in different ways about what you can do to change your game. You know, and also don't be afraid to kill your baby. That's what I'm doing this year. I'm just like culling through old designs that, you know, if they're not something by the end of the summer, then they're nothing. So, you know, you gotta do it. You gotta purge sooner or later.
I've actually often described being a game designer as a professional game designer. There's a big difference. If you design a game, you're a game designer. But if you want to be a professional game designer, the benchmark I've always used is that you have to have way more ideas than you can possibly publish or make games out of at any given time. So the ability to put something away and maybe never come back to it should be painful but easy. And if it is the only thing you're working on, that's then you basically just put there's no metric, there's no best practices for it. You just put it away until you're inspired again. But if you don't have any other ideas, I would seriously consider not doing it professionally. Like, not to scare anybody away from it, but like you have to be able to work on many things at once, because you have to design X number of games in order to publish X number of games a year in order to generate the royalties that you need, because most of your sales come in the first year or so of the game's shelf life, unless you get unless you're very fortunate with the market. So I kill games all the time, like all the time. 9 out of 10 games I put together, even if it's kind of cool, kind of fun, unless my playtesters are asking me for it, asking me to play it without my bidding, then I just don't come back to it. And I've gotten to the point now where it's easier for me to leave a game aside and not work on it again than it is to come back to it.
I think it depends on whether or not you've figured out what the problem is. If you know what the problem is, my approach is always to redesign the game, making sure that you're fixing that particular problem. And I'll redesign games sometimes 3, 4, 5 times. But if I can't get to where I'm trying to get to, or I can't identify the problem, then I shelf it, and maybe I'll come back to it at some point. I won't. I never really consider, a game that gets shelved and is not going to go anywhere as a failure, because you learn a lot. You learn probably more on your failures than you do on your successes a lot of times.
What cool trends are you seeing in the market with new styles of mechanics and or interactivity with apps and such?
Trend watcher.
Yeah, I don't know. I think right now the whole party game thing is still really, really hot. So you're going to start seeing more and more zany games. Tom always accuses me of making games that are toys because I do have kind of a toy, not fetish, but toy fixation. And I think you're going to see in more and more games that have components that kind of bridge that gap between board game and, toy, like playing, basically. Richard calls them, what is it, gadget games or something like that, that effect, where it's some sort of, some sort of weird snickerdoodle that you've added to the game that's just so crazy and weird that it stands out, And I think also as the technology gets cheaper and cheaper, you are going to start seeing that integrated more into the games, in good ways, not just like in some ways in the past it's been kind of forced. Now, some of the apps really aren't taking away from the game experience. They really are adding to it, right? And there's other technology too. You're going to see games with drones in them, and you're going to see games with RF chips in the cards. And yeah, man, there's going to be games with drones in it.
With drones in the game.
In the game. It's going to be part of the game.
All right.
But it'll be like a toy, right? It's going to be part game, part
You heard
toy.
it here first. Are you designing one of these?
Now that I think about it.
What trends are you seeing?
No one else knows any trends. Puzzle room games for sure.
All right, you had mentioned that a professional game designer has lots and lots of ideas sometimes that you'll never go back to. So, out of curiosity, have you guys ever had an idea for a board game that you thought was just the best thing ever, and every time you shared it with somebody, they looked at you like you just slapped their grandma?
Oh, I don't share ideas with people. Like if I have an idea for something, I will prototype it and prove it as a concept and then get it to the table. Precisely because of that, a lot of really cool games have ridiculous premises, and you can't just say like, well, you got to see it to believe it, right? Because then you sound like a salesman, right? I'd rather just put it together, prove it. I've done many times. I've come up with a silly idea for a game, built the prototype specifically to see if it works or not, and like 9 times out of 10 it doesn't. I put it away, and the idea's gone.
Well, I think the answer, that is the answer, really. If I have an idea for a game, I'm making the game. If I'm excited about it, I'm making the game. So I'm not going to show it to anybody until it's playable and it's good. I think, trying to share ideas of games, nobody's going to connect to that idea like you do. It's kind of like saying, I want to be a movie star when you're 17, and everybody's going to say, you'll never be a movie star. And it'll just get lost for you. If you have a real vision for a game and you want to make the game and you're a game designer, make the game.
How do you decide whether or not a piece of feedback has merit? Maybe not the prototyping phase, but after kind of a game's gotten out in the wild and some players are saying, I don't like this certain mechanic, or maybe this templating doesn't work or makes it harder to play the game. At what point do you differentiate between this is just people complaining or it doesn't jive with them, or this is something I need to look at and reevaluate and maybe change my opinion on personally?
Well, for me, it comes down to before I design a game, I have an idea of the experience I want the players to have. So when I'm watching people play the game and I'm listening to the feedback, I'm observing, are they having the experience that I wanted them to have, and will the changes that some of them are proposing, will that make that experience that I wanted them to have, better or worse? And I think as a game designer, you've got to be able to evaluate that process.
If you're hearing the same comment more than once, then you probably should look at it. You don't think so?
Not on the internet, sir.
No, I mean, if they play the game from a playtest perspective and you're hearing the same comment for playtesters, different sets of playtesters, then there's something there probably you need to at least look at.
Go ahead.
Maybe you can repeat that.
I would say, in most cases, don't listen to playtesters. Like, you are the designer and you know what you want to achieve, and they will propose you their vision of your game. They will come up with ideas, they will come up with changes, they will come up with cool, super ideas. Don't. Treat them as a clones who play your game, and you take observations.
We agree.
I just like to.
Say it nicely, okay?
I would like to develop that comment a little bit. Just give it a little refinement. So, so Ignacy and I actually talk about this a lot, and we have similar perspective, but I guess mine's a little less brutal. But I mean, so there's a big difference between verbalized feedback and kinetic feedback, which is kinesthetic feedback at the table. And we, me especially, I observe playtesters and I watch games played a lot. And I very rarely play them myself. I usually teach somebody to play and then play with the rest of the group. And usually I can tell what the issues in the game are just by watching the players play. And I get 99% of my feedback before any of the postmortem comes in. And often the postmortem is sort of a clumsy articulation of what their experience is. And that's not the playtester's fault, that's just how our brains are wired. And this is especially true of like the smarter playtesters. Smart gamers and smart people are really, really bad at retrograde memory. Like they can edit their own experience, even from a short time ago, to come to a conclusion that they've had later on. And a great example of this, right? Somebody could be struggling at some point with a particular mechanic in the game over and over and over again. They never remember how it works. And at the end of the game, very often they'll tell you, like, oh yeah, it was easy, I got it. Right? So if you only listen to verbalized feedback and don't pay attention to the fact that they're actually struggling with it, that is what Ignacy's talking about. The verbalized feedback is usually fairly inaccurate. You should listen to it, of course, right? Be polite, but but
unless you're basic.
But for the most part, their body language at the table will tell you what you need to know.
That's what I meant.
Between the time that you show your game to the very first person, whether it's a playtester or somebody who you're pitching the idea to, and the time that I'm purchasing the game at Cool Stuff Inc., how much has changed, usually?
From
From the very first time you show it, either to a publisher or a playtester?
116%. I don't think I've ever published a game that... I mean, the idea, the vision usually stays intact. What are you trying to achieve with the game? So when I start playing a game and when I start picturing what a game's going to be like, I picture in my head what the game looks like at a table when it's fun, right? And of course, all games are fun in your head, but usually the type of fun that's delivered at the end is relatively sort of in the ballpark. But how I got there, like if I envision some like clever mechanic or some clever bit that's in the game, most of that does not survive. I think especially with big box games, I changed them exactly 116%. They'll be like 150.
Yeah, I have a notepad for Robinson Crusoe, which is quite an interesting artifact because it is like 70 pages of notes when I was starting to design a game, and there is a notes for the mechanism, for everything. None of these notes made for the final game. 70 pages just changed. Like you change everything, and yeah, this is the process. Like you have some cool ideas, none of them will work, which is quite depressing when you start a new project because you are very excited that you have cool ideas, but if you're an explicit person, you know that none of these ideas will actually work, which is depressing.
When you start working on a game, you're going to, through your play test, you're going to find out how much you need to change. Sometimes you don't need to change that much, but sometimes you do. I think the best part of playtesting is writing the rules. Write your rules, and you'll figure out that some things just don't quite work. Writing the rules is the toughest part for me of game design. And if you write a good set of rules, you'll come across things that are contradictions or things that need to be explained more. And then when next time you go out and you play test them, you'll find out that, hey, so write your rules. That's the most important thing, I think, advice that I could give you is write it. After you get an idea, make a prototype, and then write the rules.
I know for sure 3 of you have designed games with other people. Given some of the other comments about not sharing ideas ahead of time and getting into the game, how have you managed to hook up with other people to design games with them?
I like to design games with other people, so I have no problem with that. It's just, and once again, by today's communications that we can do, emails and everything else, it's pretty easy to design a game together.
I absolutely love designing games with other people because I get energized and excited by talking with them, and it's just so much fun to share a vision together. But like you said, the technology right now is amazing. Everything that you would want to do in person, you could almost do, with someone hundreds of miles away.
To clarify an earlier comment, when I said like not sharing ideas, I meant specifically like I don't share ideas with the purpose of getting somebody excited about a game, right? So like we talk about ideas all the time. Like I have an idea for something that to me they're free. Those like tons of things sound interesting and cool, but most often, at least for me personally, if I want to work with somebody, I'll think of something or think of something that I don't think I could do myself. Like I need somebody else's input. And lately, quite often I think of, I usually have a couple of designers in mind specifically who would be really good for a project. Like I'm working on this game type X, which I'm kind of okay at, but I know this other person's really good at it. The two of us would do something really well together. And then I'll usually call them up and share something.
I think it comes down to once you start working on a project, you have to make sure once again you're aligned on what the vision is for that game, and drive it forward. And I found it to be very beneficial to work with people on some projects. But it all starts with that alignment of what are we trying to deliver? Because if you don't have that, I think there's going to be this real push-pull type of situation where if there's 2 different visions, that game is going to have some serious problems.
Are you worried? No, are you worried about the component quality or art quality of your games?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Are you worried about the art or component quality of your games?
In prototype or publication?
Oh, yeah, I guess my son was asking how important is the consideration around art quality and component quality when it comes to thinking about publishing a game?
Well, if it's a vanity project where you want to get your game, it's something that you have a vision for, then that's a big part of that, right? Is that it's really like at one point I asked Eric about game design, and he said, well, why do you want to design a game? Do you want to make a game, or are you trying to make money, or what's the driving force behind that, right? So obviously if this is a vanity game, then you're probably going to want more control of the art, right? But you're not really interested in making money. You just want to make your game, which is where a lot of fledgling game designers are at. They just want to make their game, right? And fortunately, you don't even have to have it published to make your own game. You can get it done on Game Crafter and even make it available to the public. And then if other people start liking that game, they can order it themselves. And then eventually, if you think there's enough interest, then you can take the next step and try to either, go Kickstarter or approach a publisher with it, right? But also, if that's really important to you, that's probably going to be some out-of-pocket expense, right? I know several other small game designers like myself that have had 1 or 2 games that have had success, making their own art before they pitch it to a publisher. But they're also banking on the fact that the publisher is going to like their art, right? I mean, the publisher might like the game but not want to use their art. Now they're out all that money for whatever they spent. And you can pretty much guarantee you're going to spend at least, $80 to $100 on a piece of art for every piece that's in there. I mean, am I right on that estimate? You people who publish more games than, Ignacy?
Yeah, sure. Well, so I'll speak for Ignacy. Why not? Oh, no, I can't do that. It's a really terrible thing to do. So I care. The question is, how much do we care about our, art and component quality? I care a lot, too much, in fact. And I'm a pain in the ass for every publisher I've ever worked with because of that. But in my opinion, you should. You absolutely should. There's so much of a tabletop game's appeal is haptic. It's in the components. It's in the feel. It's in the experience is colored by all of that. Like, we're not designing games on Excel spreadsheets or on grids with ones and zeros. We're selling the whole package. And I worked in digital games for a long time, and I spent a lot of time on user experience, UX, and user interface. All that stuff matters. In fact, in digital, user interface is considered by many to be almost like 80% of the game. So the challenge is, yes, you should care about it, absolutely care about it, but understand that if you're a game designer working with a publisher, it has to be collaborative. So you have to care. You want, of course, the best experience. You want the best quality components. You want the best quality art, but you have to be able to share that vision with a publisher who will have their own ideas and bring their own stuff to the table. It's a tightrope. You have to be really passionate, but also really able to collaborate. And it's tough. Not everybody can do it. And sometimes you get people who are like pains in the ass like me, and that care a little too much, but sometimes, but you have to be able to let it go. Is that spoken well enough for you?
2 points.
I was just interested in what level of or quantity of blind playtesting each of you utilizes for rules. Are you doing it, or are you allowing the publishers to do it? Like, how does that kind of fit into your process for rule writing?
I wish they'd write them. I'm with Richard here. That's the hardest part of the business. Every time I write rules, I feel a little piece of my soul slipping away. But you've got to write the rules, and it's got to be playable from the rules you have before the publisher's going to pick it up. And at least that's been my experience.
Me, rulebooks, really?
You're the publisher.
Fine, I'll speak for Ignacy again. I personally don't blind playtest rules very much. The publishers are very good at that. I don't even, if you look at the credits in a lot of games I designed, I'm usually not in the rulebook writing credits. The publishers usually have technical writers that are way better at this than I am. I do write a draft, and I present the draft, but it's chicken scratch, and it's not, like, it's functional, it works, it can explain the game, it does its job, but every publisher also has a style that you have to write to, and only they know their style. So at this point, I don't even try to write a complete rule book anymore. I just try to write very cogent, precise rules, and the publisher will finish it. So there's no point for me to blind test at that point. I do something that is vaguely sort of similar to blind testing, in which there's a trick. I think I do this every year, but for those of you who haven't been to Dice Tower before, one of the tips I use for playtesting is often I will go to a game store with a prototype, and I will pretend it's not mine. I'll put somebody else's name on the box, and I'll be like, hey, a buddy of mine has this prototype that wants me to try. What do you guys think? And that way, it divorces all player investment in being nice to me from the game, and you get really honest opinions. And I will sometimes just pull out the rules and say, like these are really crappy rules. Thank you. Caught myself. These are really crappy rules. Let's see if we can learn it. See what's going on. And you that way, I always believe personally that for testing a game, especially like early or mid period, you the designer have to be present. That human contact matters much more than written feedback or anything like that. So that what you're asking for is honest, uninformed feedback from a player. That's how I get it.
But you can't do that again now, can you?
Well, I'm not going to play this with any of you.
Or anyone watching this.
Forget everything. These are not the rules you're looking for.
What's the best way to get involved with your playtesting groups, specifically like the blind playtesting?
What is the best way to get involved with your playtesting groups?
Or how do you even find
for somebody
how do you find
Actually, my playtest group hasn't changed over the years. Probably I've got about 12, 15 people that I play most of the games with. I don't do a lot of blind playtest, but my friends are very critical, so it works. Of course, you got to remember, excuse me, 1 second. You got to remember, one of the playtesters, they basically say, we come to your house, we drink your beer, you feed us, and then you make us play your games. What's wrong with that?
Unfortunately, I'm in Singapore and he's in Poland, so the chances of you coming to join our live playtests are very, very low at this point. But a lot of publishers do blind playtesting, and you should it's best for you to contact the publisher at that point rather than the designer, because at that stage of testing, the designer has very, very little control and should have very little control. So you talk to people like
Publisher Portal Games is not doing any blind testing. I'm super afraid that people who play without me at the table will mess up 1 or 2 rules, and the whole playtesting session makes no sense at all because they give me a wrong feedback. This is not super smart for me because I'm playtesting games over and over with me involved, which takes a lot of time, and I know that most of the industry does blind playtesting, so I know that I'm doing it wrong, but I cannot help it. I'm afraid that if I send prototypes to some places, people will play it wrong and give me wrong feedback, and I will not know what to do with that. So we don't do this, even though I should probably.
I'm not even sure how that is advice or not, but
Is it hard to make expansions?
Oh yeah.
Is it hard to make expansions?
Yeah. Expansions.
Not at all. That's the easiest part of a game, because if you have an expansion for a game, then you just only do a little work instead of the whole creation of a game. So it's easier to do an expansion for a game than it is to do a brand new game. If you look at my body of work, most of my work is all expansions. I don't even do a core game anymore. I just do an expansion for it. It works.
I'm going to have to disagree with the senator on that one. Of course, everybody's process is different, right? But I've done a lot of work on lifestyle games, on mostly living card games or collectible card games, and the hurdle for those games, of course, yes, you don't have to design a new set of core rules, and you don't have to design a new game engine, which is definitely hard in and of itself. But the content you have to create has to be at once compelling enough to drive people to buy the expansion, add enough to the base game and change the game experience enough that they want to pick it up, and at the same time not make the core game experience more complex, more many ways that many things that all boil down to more complex, but more complex or more or drive it too far away from the core vision of the game. It turns out that when you build a game engine, it always looks like the design space is infinite for expansions, and then when you actually sit down to work on expansions, it turns out that the usable design space is much smaller than it appears to be. I worked with Wizards of the Coast on many games, Duel Masters for a while, but I watched a lot of Magic design development done. For those of you guys who play Magic the Gathering, the game looks like it's infinite in design space possibilities. It's not. It's not even close. The space that they actually have to build cards in is very, very small, which is why they repeat a lot of design, and it looks. A lot of people will like look at cards and say like, "Oh, this looks really boring. Why couldn't you make something more interesting?" I guarantee you they did. They made lots and lots of interesting stuff and ran it through the development mill, and it died the death for any number of different reasons.
I think it's really somewhere in the middle here, to be honest with you, because I think that the hard part is a lot of the parts that Eric was talking about, deciding what really goes in to that expansion and how that makes the game better, okay? And doesn't smother the original design, but actually adds to it and expands the experience. But in terms of not having to start from scratch, at least for me, it's a lot easier to put together an expansion. But that first part of actually figuring out what goes in and making sure that the pieces you're adding don't destroy some of the original game, that I think is the hard part.
All right, we'll take one last question.
Of course, Kickstarter and crowdfunding are really popular now and have started to change the industry. Do you feel that there are some major positives behind that model? And what are some negative impacts also that you might see going along with that?
Oh, that's a great final question. We only have a little bit of time for this.
Is there a Kickstarter panel at the show?
There is a Kickstarter panel that's on, no, I'm not deferring this, but there's a Kickstarter panel on Friday. I believe it's at 3, am I right? I have it actually on my schedule here. Well, you should answer this meanwhile.
Okay. Well, come see the Kickstarter panel. I'm sorry that sounds a little side, but it is a really interesting and complex question that it's really hard to answer in 10 words or less. But
that's correct. It's Friday at 1 p.m.
It's Friday at 1 p.m. So I don't know if I can even answer this without spiraling into endless amounts of detail. Do you have something quippy? You have something quippy. Ignacy's pretty quippy.
As I said the previous convention, my English is not fluent enough so I can comment my opinions about the Kickstarter.
All right, so 1 o'clock on Friday. Well, they'll talk more about Kickstarter. Or
Very sorry.
It's called crowdfunding. That's mostly Kickstarter. So we'll see you back then. I want to thank all of you guys for coming on today. We appreciate that. All of these designers. They are not the only designers here. There's at least 10 other plus designers walking around, so just say hi to them. Maybe you'll be in a game with them. If they tell you the game is not theirs but a friend of theirs, probably not true. But we're glad that you're here to spend time with them. We're glad they took some of their time to come up and talk about these things. And so that's pretty much it. Thanks so much for watching our designer panel. I'm Tom Vassell. We'll see you later.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at DicetowerNetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool Stuff, in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
Bags in our chairs. I really feel like we might fill